there's not a genocide in South
That's
Africa.
That's right.
And we have a refugee program.
I am sure there's been violence
against
one side or the other.
There has been violence. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. I want to make a point. Violence does not equal genocide. So we need to be really, really clear about that. Because if you look
at
the
dead guy, you may not say that.
Okay. So if you think about the history of South Africa, it being under an apartheid system, and that allowed for a racial reconciliation, one that this country has yet to do, but South Africa did it, and they reformed their constitution, and part of that is that the people who are native to that land deserve their rightful land back. That is not what the Afrikaners actually want to have happen, which are the white Africans. Now, if the constitution in South Africa is discriminatory, they have their checks and balances in that land, just like we do. And that is for them to. So if the Afrikaners don't actually like the land, they can leave that country.
They are. They're leaving to come here.
No.
These refugees are coming here.
They can actually leave and go to where their native land is, which is probably Germany.
Are you against them coming here?
Holland, probably.
Holland.
Are you against them coming here?
I'm against the hypocrisy of this administration.
No, that's not the question. The question is, are you against them coming?
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to talk about a story that I'm pretty sure most of you guys are familiar with. I haven't talked about it directly. I haven't dedicated a sole video to it, but I think this is the video I'm going to dedicate to it because these people are still boohoo, whining, crying about President Trump allowing a few dozen South African refugees into the country. Okay, now normally Democrats would be totally okay with refugees from Africa coming into the country, right? Liberals and the mainstream liberal media, they would be celebrating this, except these South Africans are white, right? They're white South Afrikaners, right? They're Afrikaners that were let into the country because they are fleeing systemic persecution, racially motivated farm attacks, and they're claiming that the government has failed to protect them adequately. In fact, one could easily argue that the government is complicit, okay, in this systemic oppression due to the fact that the government has openly supported redistributing land from white farm owners to black citizens without paying compensation. So you have that, along with the fact that you have political parties in South Africa that are explicitly anti-white, that are calling for acts of violence to be done against white people. Yeah, they're seeing the writing on the wall, and some of them, a very small amount of them, have decided to leave, okay? But you have a lot of them who have decided to stay, which I respect, by the way. I respect all the white South Afrikaners who said, no, this is my country, and I'm going to stay here and, you know, have my farm, and I'm not going anywhere, right? I respect the hell out of that. But again, a few dozen of them decided to come over to the United States of America, holding American flags, right? Showing their gratitude for being allowed into this country. And yeah, these left-wing lunatics, they have been losing their minds since then. Take a look.
Welcome. Welcome to the United States of America.
Thank you, sir.
It is such an honor for us to receive you here today. And we are excited to welcome you here to our country where we think you will bloom, and we will hopefully allow you to have fulfilling lives for your children, and then we will bloom and we will benefit alongside you. So thank you very much for coming here.
This South African farmer bullshit, which is the most blatantly obvious racist shit ever. It is blatantly obvious the way that we treat white South Africans, who, by the way, for the most part, and I am generalizing here, some of the wealthiest people are well-to-do people in the country. They speak their language. They own most of the land and the property. And somehow they're being granted a fast track to become Americans while they're trying to cut down on immigration from other countries. You know, you get that from where? From the brown people. On March 7th, Trump took to Truth Social to announce he is offering white South African farmers, quote, a rapid pathway to U.S. citizenship, pointing out that South Africa's new land reform push signed into law last year, which lets the government take land without compensation if the property is not being used and there's no intention to either develop or make money from it. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you some context here. They're not just taking land away from white South African farmers. White South Africans, about 9% of the population, owned 87% of the fertile land. Okay? Today, black South Africans make up more than 90% of the population, and they only hold about 4% of all privately owned land. So what they're trying to do is say, hey, We need to fix an historical injustice and figure out if you're not using that land to farm, then we need to have some of that land, not taking all of your entire farm. That's not what's happening. And we need to what? There needs to be equity. And now people are crying because the playing field is being leveled. And so therefore it is now discrimination.
Yeah, this is for all you YT South Afrikaners that are being shipped in by Trump. You need to know the majority of Americans don't want you here. You just jump back on another plane and fly your little racist YT supremacist butts right on back to your country. Go back to Africa. We do not want your racist butts here. You are not welcome in the United States, and Trump is not going to be in charge forever. Yeah, you're not welcome here. We don't want any more Snazis in America. We're done. And we're the majority. MAGA wants you to believe they're the majority, but they are not. Just saying. Fly your asses to another country where they want racists like you, because you're not welcome here.
Donald Trump has virtually halted refugee admission in America for people fleeing war and famine in places like Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Back with Rick, Mark, and Eddie. Rick Stengel.
Yes, it's so deeply and morally wrongheaded and repulsive. These are the descendants of the people who created the most diabolical system of white supremacy in human history, apartheid. They're not directly responsible for it, but it was a system that actually moved black people off of the arable land. So they inherited the land that the black people had to give up. It was called forced removal. It was something called a Bantustan policy, where they moved black people out of the cities and farmlands into these remote areas with non-arable land. I mean, it was just one of the most worst processes ever. But what has happened in this strange, bizarre world we're living in is that the Afrikaners have become the darling of these right-wing, white supremacist movements around the world, that it's like the lost cause for them. It's like the old Confederacy. They're held up as these white Christians who are being dispossessed of their land. It's like this is a modern replacement theory in a country where, by the way, white people make up 7% of the population and own 78% of the farmland. So it's actually, there's no injustice here. As you mentioned, it's taking places away from refugees who are really being crushed by authoritarian governments and military governments, for these folks who have never had anything happen to them. I mean, Trump amazingly called it a genocide, one of the worst lies I've ever heard him say. There's just been a small handful of farmers that have been killed over the past 10 years. No land has actually been expropriated.
Yeah, so I want you guys to understand, right? According to leftist woke logic, right? If you tell a black person to go back to Africa, that is racist, okay? But if you tell a white person to go back to Africa, that's just social justice, okay? Again, that's apparently how these people think. But it doesn't stop there, right? It gets even worse in regards to the meltdown over this. Because the woke bishops, who are supposed to be pro taking care of refugees and immigrants and stuff like that, right? They decided that they're not going to service, they're not going to help out these white refugees, right? This is what they're saying on national television, that they're going to deny them service and help, even though they are refugees.
Of course, this was a 4-decades-old relationship across many administrations that was ended abruptly today. Why did the classification of these immigrants as refugees cross a moral line?
Well, the reality is we can't be ourselves in the Episcopal Church and take the step of resettling white Afrikaners from South Africa. Our church has a long commitment to racial justice and reconciliation, and we have historic ties with the Anglican Church of South Africa. Desmond Tutu is a part of, been a partner was a partner in this work for us. So we're just not able to take this step. It's not in line with anything that we're about. And it also saddens us to see that other refugees who are being denied entrance to the United States are people, brave people who've worked alongside of our military in Iraq and Afghanistan, now face danger, have been in camps for a long time and aren't being allowed in. And so this is just, the program no longer aligns with where we are as a church and what we're about.
Wow, incredible stuff. The anti-white hatred is on full display from the mainstream liberal media, some of these woke churches, right? They're basically saying that, yeah, we have no problem whatsoever with millions, literally millions of so-called black and brown people coming into the country illegally, right? Illegally. Okay, as much as them as possible can come in the country, right? And if you complain about it, you're a racist, right? If you say, hey, maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe this is causing crime, okay? Maybe these people are a strain on our social safety net. Maybe they don't assimilate properly. Oh, well, you're a racist, right? You must just hate blacks and Latinos, right? This is what they say. But as soon as President Trump lets a few dozen white refugees into the country, now all of a sudden these people boohoo, whine, and cry, right? They're saying, go back to Africa. They're not going to service and help out these refugees in the same way that they would for anybody else. Absolutely fascinating stuff, right? It's almost as if these people just really, really, really don't like white people, right? And essentially their illegal immigration agenda is also basically an anti-white agenda because, again, when white people are a part of the equation, when you're letting white people into the country or white refugees into the country, all of a sudden they don't support mass immigration to the country anymore, right? They don't support that, right? Again, it's just hilarious how that works. So that being said, we have to react to this fascinating interview here between Trump administration official Tricia McLaughlin, the Assistant Secretary of Public Affairs, and his woke CNN anchor who is going to rage about President Trump allowing these white South African refugees into the country. But at the same time, there are other groups of people that, aren't necessarily being allowed. And again, this is a very, very, very fascinating interview. So without further ado, let's get into it.
McLaughlin, she's back with us. She's the Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the Department of Homeland Security. Tricia, welcome back. Let me start here. Despite the president's repeated reference, can we just start this conversation by agreeing that Afrikaners are not facing genocide?
Absolutely not. First of all, I have to correct the facts, Victor. You said that no refugees were let in. Under President Donald Trump, since January 20th, 8,666 individuals have been granted asylum. Those people have faced persecution for their politics, persecution for the color of their skin, their religion, and that includes those 59 Afrikaners who came in this country last week who have faced racial violence at the hand of their own government. They've had their land seized because of the color of their skin. There's been over 140 laws enacted that are race-based and to discriminate against racial minorities. So I got to correct the facts where you're wrong, Victor, and you're wrong.
So, several things. President Ramaphosa says that although the law was signed in January that would give the government the purview to take the land, no land has been taken from Afrikaners. Also, that's President Ramaphosa. He'll be at the White House this week. Take it up with him. Also, the definition of genocide is aimed at extermination, right? And so although there is violence in South Africa, there's violence against black South Africans too. So when the president says that there is genocide, where is the evidence? The U.S. has not recognized officially genocide. The United Nations has not recognized genocide. And for the thousands of people who you say were let into this country who've been granted asylum, absolutely. I'm talking under the Refugee Resettlement Program, which the president froze by executive order early in his administration.
Yeah, so here's the thing about the whole genocide stuff, right? I just find it to be so funny how now all of a sudden CNN is upset with people basically carelessly throwing around the term genocide, right, to describe what's happening in the country, when they've never had any problems with the left recklessly throwing around the word or the term genocide being used to describe any other conflict, right, in which, leftists are trying to push their agenda. So I'm just saying when it comes to, people being upset about using the term genocide to describe what's happening in South Africa, if you got a problem with that, then take it up with the left, right? Because they've set that precedent that any conflict that they don't like, you can call a genocide, right? I'm just saying. But, when you look at a government, passing legislation, laws, in order to essentially have land taken from people based off race. You may say, well, they haven't done that yet, right? But that's where it starts, right? It starts with those type of policies. And what do you think that leads to, right? Again, you give them an inch, they take a mile, right? I mean, over time, you can see what this type of policy leads to, okay? And it's not going to lead to good outcomes socially or economically. But again, it's a part of the equity agenda, right? It's a part of the agenda to essentially, do race-based redistribution, right? And race-based redistribution, that's not something that happens without significant conflict, right? Without significant violence and chaos, right? That's typically how it happens, because people are just not gonna just give up their land, okay, because they want to make things right when it comes to race relations. That's typically not how these things go down, right? So I'm just saying, we should have to wait until there is a mass conflict in order to say that, hey, maybe, just maybe, this is headed in the wrong direction. And South Africa is already a violent enough country as it is, right? It's one of the most violent places on earth, okay? It's a place that I would love to visit, to be honest with you. But again, the violence is out of control, okay, in some parts of that country. So it's a dangerous place to visit. I mean, at the end of the day, these people can boohoo, whine, and cry about this, but honestly, they're just revealing their own racism, right? While claiming to be fighting against racism, they're revealing just how much they really don't like the idea of white people immigrating to the United States of America, and that's what this CNN anchor is going to show.
Victor, can we take a pause and recognize the fact that you are defending race-based discrimination? You are defending race-based violence.
I'm not defending race-based discrimination in any way. The president uses the term genocide. There is no genocide in South Africa. And frankly, it does a disservice to people in countries around the world who are facing genocide in the Congo, in Sudan, those who faced it in Rwanda and Bosnia and Cambodia. So when the president says that there's genocide in South Africa, it does not exist. We should probably just start with that truth.
Okay, if you're going to allow me on your program, I'd like to speak.
You're welcome to.
we have granted asylum to 8,666 individuals since January 20th, regardless of color or creed. It is quite frankly disturbing to me that members of the media, including people who are on this very network, are trying to whitewash the facts and whitewash the fact that these individuals have faced discrimination, racial violence, the seizure of their land based on nothing but their skin color alone. This is the United States of America, a land of opportunity, and we will help those who are facing persecution from the government of South Africa.
So you clearly are not going to acknowledge there's no genocide in South Africa. What about the genocide in the Congo? Will there be this expedited path available to the Congolese and to the Sudanese who are facing actual genocide?
Again, Victor, 8,666 individuals have been granted
You
asylum.
have a specific number on asylum. How many of those are from the Congo or from the Sudan?
I'm happy to come back next week and lay out all the single facts, but the fact that you have not addressed the fact that we have helped these individuals who are facing persecution, and you seem to want to whitewash the fact that South Afrikaners are facing persecution, and I can't understand why, and I think a lot of Americans can't understand why, and it's left to believe that it's because of the color of their skin, Victor.
So you suggest that I am the one here who is focused on color of skin when the president has let in Afrikaners specifically, and I'm asking how many of those who are actually facing genocide, who are from the Sudan and who are from Congo, who are being let in under some expedited path that the president has created for Afrikaners?
I don't know how many times I have to repeat this fact. 8,666 individuals have, if you will let me speak, have faced persecution.
You've repeated the number. You haven't answered the question.
I'm exactly answering the question. Regardless of color or creed, we will allow you into this country if you are facing persecution and you go through the proper vetting. You can be from the Congo. You can be from Rwanda. We are letting those in who are facing persecution, Victor.
I'll look for those numbers. Let's talk about...
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Okay. So this CNN anchor didn't like it when the race card got played on him, right? Again, it's amazing. The people who love playing the race card, they can't stand it when that card gets played on them, right? It's funny how that works. Give these people a taste of their own medicine, right? That's how you reveal their hypocrisy, okay? Because ultimately, at the day, none of these people had anything to say about the millions of people who poured into this country who were not white, right? They poured into the country. They came into the country. So we let all these non-white people into the country, and we let 59 white folks in the country from South Africa, and now all of a sudden these people are mad and they're upset when they had nothing to say, when we were letting in millions of people, unvetted, by the way, right? That's another part about it. These white South Afrikaners are vetted, right? These are vetted individuals, okay? They can assimilate into our society. They speak English, right? So again, they're more culturally compatible with our society than let's just say, for example, taking some, refugee from the Congo, right? Or from Sudan. Well, a lot of these people, they don't have the same culture that we have, right? They don't share the same common values. They don't speak the same language. Assimilation is going to be very difficult for those people. Maybe other countries, maybe their African brothers and sisters can take them in, right? And take care of them. Okay, maybe it's more appropriate for them to go to other countries. Maybe it's not appropriate for them to come to our country. So yeah, we should give priority to some people over others, right? And again, a lot of that, in my opinion, has to do with their ability to assimilate, because we can't take in everybody. We can't take in the whole world. So we're going to have to be selective. Some people are going to be left out, okay, and some people are going to be allowed in. It's not always going to be 100% fair, right? But we got to look out for the best interests of our country. We got to make sure that our citizens are not going to be harmed by foreigners coming into the country who shouldn't be allowed into the country. It doesn't matter if they're fleeing political persecution or whatever, right? Hey, if we're talking about allowing people into our country, we have the right to be selective about it, right? We have the right to say, hey, how well are these people going to assimilate? And that plays a factor into whether or not they should be allowed in, okay? I would argue, again, that these white South Afrikaners, right, are most likely going to assimilate more so than a lot of the millions of people that have come into the country under Joe Biden and Democrats, right? They're going to be much more compatible with our culture and our society than some of the other people that have been led to the country. But again, Democrats didn't care about that, right? Open borders under Joe Biden didn't care, right? No complaints whatsoever. And the problem is so bad that there are parts of this country in Florida, Texas, California, where you need Spanish just to get by, right? And to get a job, right? They don't even speak English, okay? Nobody has any issues with that, right? Nobody has any issues with that whatsoever, right? The fact that we've let in so many illegal immigrants, so many people, that there are literally large parts of this country where English is basically the second language, okay? People don't have a problem with that, right? But you got a problem with, again, a few dozen white South Africans coming into the country who, for the most part do speak English, who are going to assimilate into our culture, right? Who nobody's going to notice at all, right? You're not going to notice these people at all. But these people are so mad, they're so upset. And they boo-hoo, whine, and cry about it. Again, it's fascinating stuff. Again, it's almost as if these people are racist, right? They're racist against whites, right? That's what it seems like to me. I'm just saying because, hey, I've never heard these people boo-hoo, whine, and cry about any other people coming to this country. We've let in plenty of refugees from all over the world, okay? Black, brown, we've let them into the country. And hey, enough of them have come, right? I don't think that it's going to be the end of the world to allow a few white folks into the country who are also claiming to be refugees, right? I don't think that is the end of the world. But again, if you listen to these people, this is some type of tragedy, right? That this is one of the worst things ever. It's fascinating stuff. Absolutely fascinating. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.